Not Titles podcast. I am so happy to be here today with attorney Sean Byrne, Zach Koran, broker, and Donna Gelmanovich, broker on the Koran Group real estate team. Is that right?
That's right, the Zach Koran Group.
Awesome, Zach Koran Group. And everyone's contact information will be in the show notes, so that'll be something that people will want to access. But we're excited about having you, number one, because each of you have a great career in your own rights. Sean as a real estate attorney, and you, Zach and Donna, as brokers. But also, we want to kind of dive into the unique relationship you guys have as broker and attorney, and how that really is a value proposition for you, Zach and Donna, that you bring to the marketplace, and Sean, how you support their business in a way that is unique. So I'm really excited about diving into that. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about Zach and Donna, how you got started, and then we'll pivot to Sean, how he got started in law, which is almost 20 years, Sean?
24 almost.
24, okay, so amazing.
Wow.
So Zach, so when did you first decide, hey, I'm going to become a real estate broker?
You know, it's funny. I was in fitness before, and I'd always had it in my mind. You know, real estate had appealed to me, design, architecture, but also I was in a client-based business already. So like just being with people and being of service, I really thought that real estate could be it for me. So that probably started about 10 years ago, and then I got my license 7 years ago.
And were you part-time in the beginning?
Good question. So I did both for the first 2.5, 3 years.
Okay.
So I trained people about 40 hours a week, and I did about 20 to 30 hours a week of real estate for the first 3 years.
And so would you, someone who's sitting at home going, hey, I want to get my real estate license, would you recommend that they try part-time? Did that work for you?
Great question. I've been asked this before. You know, I personally, from a financial standpoint, I did not have a huge nest egg at the time.
Right.
So I had to do it, right? I had to do it. But, I think if I would have cut that cord a little quicker, meaning that, if I just would have dove in faster.
Burn the boats.
Without without having that easy way in, if that makes sense. Or, I wish I would have cut the cord a little quicker.
Okay.
But financially, it made it easy to do both at the same time for a while.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you have that desperado look, like I need to make this,
Make
so
it happen.
it took some pressure off you probably, so that you could really focus on your clients' needs and not, kind of the have to make a sale type of mojo. But I know it's a delicate balance. Commission income, you don't sell, you don't eat. There's
Right.
something motivating about that, right?
Absolutely, and I think not keeping our eyes so much on the dollar, and rather keeping it more on the service helped me anyways establish my business very differently at the beginning, getting more referrals, down the road, and just keeping service, first and foremost always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Zach, at what point did you say it's time to cut the cord? What was the key moment?
I was at this point where it was 2017, and I was at this point where, okay, I've had my license for 3 years. I literally have doubled my business every year.
Nice.
At the beginning, just year in, year out. And I got to this point where I was just getting a plethora of referrals and a plethora of leads, and I'm like, this is the year. So that was in 2017, and I kind of just the training went down, the real estate went up, and I was able to dive in full time.
Wow! And so
Yeah.
that first year, were you able to thrive right out of the gate?
I got I'm grateful and I'm lucky, but yeah, I did.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Good.
it was great.
I love it.
I worked with a lot of buyers that first year. I think it was probably 26 or 27 sales.
Wow!
Yeah, and it was very good to me.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, Donna, you joined Zach's team when?
Almost exactly a year ago.
Okay, and how's that working for you? I know you were in a sales career, right?
Yeah.
And so what had you sparked for real estate?
So I also have been in service-based sales for a really long time. Actually, also worked in the health and fitness industry. I'm more on the sales side, and I loved the aspect of building the personal relationships. And I did that for about 10 years and then moved over to like enterprise sales, and I was just absolutely not happy. I did not like working with corporations, and fortunately and unfortunately, I guess more fortunately, I was laid off in a restructure and really trying to figure out my next move, and Zach told me that I should get into real estate. He's like, you'd love it, you'd be great at it. I mean, he's known me for 15 years or so,
Yeah.
so he definitely knows what my strengths are, and I figured, you know what, I've got time right now, I may as well go for it, and yeah, it's been truly something that I've actually enjoyed doing and not doing for the money. So
That's great. And so what is the dynamic between you two, like in terms of how you serve your clients? Is it each one grabs their own client? Is it there's a certain role that Donna plays as a part of the Koran Group? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So
It's pretty unique.
yeah, it I'm the leader. No, just kidding.
Well, I mean, he's
Dictatorship. No, just kidding.
He's not kidding.
I actually do consider Donna a partner.
That's great.
But from a responsibility standpoint, she does help me. As I'm kind of laughing at Sean, I do consider her a business partner, 100%. That's what I tell people, you know, and I really do. And from a responsibility standpoint, as it relates to her duties, she helps me with quite a bit.
Okay.
You know, and we co-list listings together. She takes some buy leads from me. We have a Zillow campaign in the city in 60622 that she really heads up most of those buy side leads, because my referrals come in and I basically work those, and then she works the buy leads that come in on the Zillow side, and then any business she has too. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and one of the great things, you know, when you get a group, right, in this sense, it is you're getting you and you know, so it's
Right.
more than just you know, so I think it's a really neat sell in that way, you know.
Well, if I could add to that, because
Sure.
I think they do something very unique between the two of them, and within the Koran Group, is there are not a lot of realty groups that have a sort of dedicated operations person. You know, somebody that's really managing all of the minutia, you know, not only with the attorney, but with all of the partners, you know, and, you know, from title all the way to attorney, all the way to inspector. And, you know, I think Zach was, you know, he had a lot of foresight in saying, you know, how am I going to continually grow this? How am I going to continually get better? And, you know, one of the areas that I think a lot of people overlook, and he didn't, was, you know, how do we achieve operational excellence? And one of the things that, you know, I've known Donna for about 15 years, with 10 or 15 years, somewhere in that
Wow,
neighborhood. One of the things that I think she excels at is, you know, they're both very organized, but Donna is a lead in that regard, and is a real go-getter in that sense. And so I think they add another layer of comfort for their clients to know everything is being handled.
That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we try our best, you know, and I mean, like you said, we want to grow together, and we want to continue to do more business and help more people, but we also want to keep that level of service high, you know, because we don't want that, you know, obviously sometimes, you know, people grow too quickly, and that operations starts to lack, right? And then the service gets really diluted.
Yeah.
So we're trying just to obviously grow, but we want to keep service as best as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a very high-touch group of people,
Yeah.
and, you know, I work with a wide variety of brokers, you know, some are better than others, and I prefer working with the high-touch people because, you know, it's just that's how I like to treat my clients, and so when there's alignment in that regard, it makes things a lot easier.
That's great. So Sean, let's talk about how you got started in law, and then what drew you to primarily real estate law. Is that the primary piece of your business, or?
It's about 50-60% of our
Okay.
practice.
Fantastic. So you know, tell us about your early beginnings.
Well, I went to law school.
Okay, yeah.
So
That helps, right?
There was that. And you know, I was very fortunate to have some very good jobs out of the gate that gave me a wide variety of experience. I started in commercial real estate, but I also handled all of the litigation for that firm. Then I was recruited by another firm that was more heavy into litigation, but I still got to do real estate, and they had me working on some employment matters.
Did you like litigation?
You know, it depends on the day.
Okay.
Yes, but you know, I'm a problem solver.
Okay.
You know, I think there are litigators out there that they litigate because they think they're good at fighting or they want to fight.
Yeah, they would just argue.
I just want to resolve whatever the problem is.
Okay.
You know, and so I take a different approach to that. And about maybe 6 or 7 years into my practice, I was recruited by a major consulting firm to help with operational stuff because that was kind of, I had developed a reputation in the field for being good with operations and, you know, trying to find different efficiencies because as a rule, I think attorneys are very inefficient creatures by nature.
Yeah.
They don't really think about, you know, what are the things they can do to improve their profit margin. They just say, I'll just, you know, raise my hourly rate.
Yeah.
And, you know, clients, they were already pushing back, especially corporate clients, on, you know, we don't want you to raise your hourly rate, it's already too high. You know, like what can you be doing to leverage it down to lower cost resources? You know, can you be using automation and other technologies to offset some of the legal spend that we're giving your firm? And, you know, I was often tasked with that. And so I was hired by, you know, a major consultancy to do litigation consulting. And for the next 15 years, you know, I had a law practice on the side where I would, you know, handle closings and small matters for people. But my main focus was on that operational stuff. And during that time, I got a project management certification and I got a Six Sigma Green Belt, which has to do with operational waste reduction and efficiency, which is one of the things that I like about you guys because, you know, one of your core management people has a Six Sigma background as well.
Yeah.
So he and I have had long conversations, and he's implemented a lot of my ideas, and he has plenty of his own that I've never even thought of, and you know that makes you guys a pleasure to work with.
Thank you.
You know, I eventually got pulled back into full-time law as a general counsel, working for an IT consulting firm that focused on the legal vertical. And then from there, I was asked to run the software division of a large electronic discovery, legal technology provider. And then I became general counsel of an AI software provider. And so, you know, I kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper dives into what can lawyers do to supplement their abilities to enhance them in ways that are value added to the client. Eventually, I had enough of a foundation that I thought I could really start a very unique legal practice that was very process oriented and technology enabled. And we've been going for about 7 years now.
Fantastic.
And growing every year.
So, and it's one thing to have all those skills, but it's another thing to kind of launch off into an entrepreneurial venture where you are now having to get out there and bring business in. And how did you balance that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
At first, it was, you know, the way I balanced it was long hours and a very understanding family. And, you know, it's eventually I learned what were the pain points. You know, let's just focus on the real estate part of it for a moment.
Sure.
I mean, I could spend, you know, this entire podcast telling you how you balance it in litigation, how you balance it in employment or bankruptcy or other areas. But, you know, just as it relates to litigation, you know, I took a look at, you know, what were all the questions that needed to be asked throughout a transaction? What were all the tasks? What were the handoffs for those tasks? You know, where could we shorten the handoff time or keep it with one resource as opposed to handing it off to multiple people? Where were there opportunities to automate a step so that you reduced or eliminated human interaction and the potential for human error? And as a result, you know, what started out as a relatively ad hoc process as we were learning slowly got codified into a process, and then we eventually got to the level where all of our brokers now have their own workflows. So we can have very thoughtful conversations with our brokers to say, you know, what is it that you want us to handle? You know, some brokers really want to be involved in the attorney review phase. Others want nothing to do with it. You know, and so knowing, you know, where our brokers' desires are and where their strengths and weaknesses are allows us to be a better partner, and it also allows us to make it, you know, sort of a road, almost a factory or manufacturing line type of process where there's not a ton of thought that needs to go into a lot of the very basic blocking and tackling steps, and it leaves us more time to give more value-added legal advice, especially if you run into bumps in the road, which, although none of us want them to happen in real estate transactions, they happen all the time, especially in a market like this.
Totally. Okay, so when did you guys, so I want to pivot to, that's great, I love it, and, you know, there's a part of getting the word out, because you can have all the process, you can be the best, right? But if you got no business, you're the best at doing nothing, right? So you guys started doing business together, right? And so, well, when was the first transaction that you guys did together?
That was I'm gonna jump in here really quickly
Yeah.
because I've known Sean as a friend for a long time, and he's occasionally whenever I had questions that might utilize his legal expertise, he was very very kind and generous with that. And when I told him I was going into real estate, I gave him my word that my first deal, he was gonna be my attorney on it.
Wow,
And
that's great.
I stood by that, and I mean, even though I worked on several things, like kind of more like as a secondary or an assistant type of
Yeah.
fashion for Zack for some other ones, once I finally had my own first clients that I was working with and taking through to closing, I got Sean on board. It was a crazy smooth, like start to finish transaction that like I was just waiting, like something's
Something's
gonna
gonna
happen,
pop
like,
out, there's a
something-
boogeyman in
yeah,
the bushes.
yeah, because I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, and I wasn't green anymore. I've gone through quite a lot with Zack, where I've seen some stuff, and like things weren't always smooth, and like nothing with due to him or the people that he works with. It's just
just like Sean said, it's part of
Yeah.
it's part of the deal sometimes.
exactly.
Yeah, and as the leader, Zach, how important is it for you when people are either going out and trying to purchase a home with you, or they're listing their home?
Sure.
They are getting more than just Zach and Donna, right? They're getting your team. And so what are you looking for and what had you say, hey, Sean's gonna be a part of my team? What was
Great,
that? Yeah.
that's a great question.
Mhm.
I think number one is we want to make sure that we do business the same way.
Mhm.
And I know Sean, it's been great doing business with him, and we're definitely aligned in that way.
Mhm.
Meaning that service is number one.
Mhm.
Service has to be number one. Communicate, over communicate, and really make it kind of goes back to the service part, but the experience needs to be number one. And what that means by that is like it's all about like the touching, the setting expectations,
Mhm.
et cetera. And I know, and also like Sean mentioned, in his experience as being counsel, he has a wide array of different types of deals that he's done, and he has great experience. So knowing that's why we wanted to team up with him.
Yeah, and let's talk about setting expectations. So what is it? How, what, is that a first meeting for you, Sean, when you're meeting with a broker? How do you guys work through that?
Well, I want to hear, I'm a big fan. I learned early in the business world. I took a Franklin Covey sales leadership course, and they talked about this concept of red, yellow, and green lights. And I manage my personal and my professional relationships like that now, where if somebody is giving me a big red light, I need to stop and not continue to press forward with that. Or conversely, there might be a green light and that might be a great fit and it's an easy conversation. Or there might be a yellow light where it's like I'm not sure whether there's a good fit here or not. And I learned very, very early on in my legal practice that jamming a round peg in a square hole was not a good idea. And so when I talk to brokers, I like any other attorney, I want business, but I want the right kinds of business, and that's better for my sleep habits and my sanity. And so, I will ask them a lot of questions about, what do they feel they excel at, what differentiates them, but I'll try and dig deeper than the basic superficial salesy answers that you might get when you're talking to somebody you don't know that well.
Yeah.
And I talk about what's missing. Like if you could create the perfect relationship, what would it look like? And then from there I gauge how realistic are they? Is that something that I can see my team doing for them?
Yeah.
And then from there, I come back to them and I try and craft, what I think is a good workflow, and I say, do you want to try this out and see how this works? And, more times than not, we get a lot of positive feedback and repeat business,
So that's great, I love it. And, so if you're sitting down, with a person that wants to list their home, right? And so what are the things that because you're trying to get their listing, but there's also a piece of it that says, I don't want to lose sight of this transaction to, somewhere, I don't want a gap where I don't have kind of the home court advantage, my home team on the transaction. So what are the kind of things that you, or kind of phrases or words that you use to say, hey, Sean's gonna be a good attorney, he's be a great choice for you? How do you work that in without sounding too salesy and trying to direct business to Sean's way, but at the same token, knowing that I have a professional, I know what I'm doing, and like Jordan and Pippen, or however you wanna do it, I need to know where my man is on the court when we're coming out on a fast break or whatever it is.
Very carefully.
Yes.
No, that's obvious.
Yeah.
I think, and I'll let Donna talk, chime in as well, but, for me, it's like, I think it's all about sharing the experience of helping, of the fact that you've helped clients together in the past.
Yes.
They've had great experiences as well, and if it's a similar type of deal, well, Sean helped us with, Bob and Susan on their house too, and it was a similar type of house, and, they had a great experience. So, I think it's more about sharing the experience.
Yeah, and stories.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
and
that's
sharing
great.
stories,
Mhm.
rather than saying, this is our team and you have to work with
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Because
That's great.
that's not, it needs to be a comfortable conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That's great.
and to chime in on that, you definitely wanna put it in the client's court as far as like, look, ultimately it's up to you, the attorney and the lender that you work with, but these are my preferred partners, and the team dynamic that you have is very important, and it's just setting the expectations, especially with, and I work with a lot of first-time buyers.
Yes.
Just really letting them know that, like, look, you're not working with me, you're working with the team.
Yeah.
And your team is very important because ultimately they're gonna carry you from, your pre-approval to the closing table.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people that are gonna be involved, but the three core components of your team are gonna be, for a buyer, your lender, your attorney, and your agent.
Mm.
And for me, like, having worked with Sean
Mhm.
on deals and having had very, very great results, smooth transactions, most importantly, great client experience.
Mhm. That's
You know,
great.
if it's all about their feedback, and
Yeah.
that's really how, that's how we'll work with the same attorney, the same lenders, the same home inspectors. When the client has very positive feedback, okay, that's reinforces it.
The NAR did a study and said that 85% of buyers and sellers want to use someone that the broker recommends. Okay, so you are totally scratching an itch that the client has said, so to have a valued partner is totally key. Let's say someone says, hey, that's great, you have Byrne Law, but my cousin Vinny got me out of a DUI over Christmas, and I really want to throw him a bone with this real estate transaction.
Yeah.
Is it important to use a real estate attorney these days?
Great question, I'll chime in, and
Yeah.
yes, I had a client, and I'll tell you a quick story. I had a client, very, very dear friend of mine, a few years back, and her brother was, is an attorney, and
Mhm.
needless to say, he was not a real estate attorney, but he had done a couple transactions in the past,
Yes.
probably for family, and it was difficult.
Mhm.
I'll just say that like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it's so important. It's so important because again, it's the experience in that particular in real estate,
Yeah.
but also everything else around that too, and how to deal with it, how to work with, how to deal with other real estate attorneys as well, and the transaction.
Yeah.
You want it to go smooth and lead back to that really good experience.
Yeah, and Sean, maybe you could speak to it, that as good as an attorney might be, if you're not daily doing real estate or in the mix, you're missing stuff, right?
You absolutely are. I think real estate transactions inure themselves so well to like a very organized process.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to know the steps that you're hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is your residential real estate transaction is not rocket science. We're not, we're not managing the bankruptcy and restructuring of a major corporation in the public eye. All right. That being said, it is probably the most important financial transaction that particular client has ever done or is doing at that moment. And so it carries an outsized importance to your client. So you have to be able to put yourself in the client's shoes and not look at some of the other things that you work on to say, well, this isn't that big of a deal, because it's a huge deal to them.
Yes, absolutely.
You need a deal making attorney as opposed to a combative one that wants to win every deal point.
Yeah.
You have to know which deal points to give on, you have to know which ones to stick on, and you have to let your clients guide those choices. You have to give them the information and let them make an informed decision.
That's what I want to pause. That's really powerful, Sean, because when I was sharing with Zack before recording this that I had my own mortgage brokerage during the Big Short time, and I really felt like nobody was representing the buyer or the seller during that period of time. That it was all about getting to the table, and so there's a balance, because your ultimate, Zach and Donna recommend you. That they want to get to the end. They want to get to the close. They put a lot of work into this. How do you balance, and yet they want what's best for the client. How do you balance the desire to get to the end result, which is a home for someone, a sale for someone, and revenue for the parties involved, and red flags that come up where you could be the party pooper? You know what I mean? In that, how do you balance that?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure I've come up with the be all end all answer for it yet. It really depends on the broker. When I deal with Zach and Donna, they very much want what's in the client's best interest. So I don't get any pressure from them. Make sure this deal goes through. At the same time, I think I make them comfortable, because before I call the client, who is the person that I have ultimately responsible.
There was a fly on the windowsill and he was dead, but he was barely dead. He was flapping around it. I don't know if we should do this deal. Oh, wait.
I mean, yeah. So there are many triggers for attorneys.
Yeah.
And so, if you're working on a deal, especially if you're working on a fixed fee deal and you're working with a super combative attorney the other side, I know plenty of attorneys that'll just kill that deal because it's not good for the profit margin. And they'll tell you to walk away from it, and they'll blindside the brokers with it. And those attorneys, I think rightfully earn the deal killer label. What I'll do is I will reach out to my brokers first to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What's your perspective here? What are some of the other things that we should consider when we both call the client to talk about what we think are the strong points to this deal and some points that they need to be aware of.
So it's a collaborative thing between the brokers. You're not working in a silo, and if you don't have your teammate on the transaction, they're having a communication, you're having a communication, and next thing you know, you have siloed communications and you're fighting against each other to get to the table, as opposed to working together as a team.
Correct.
To make sure you're managing dates and all that.
And if you're not doing that, and I think that's why we have a great relationship. We communicate great. And but if you don't do that, things get lost.
Yes.
Like communication gets lost.
Yep.
The client is losing really at the end of the day, right? Because they're not in the now of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I don't do a ton of war stories, but I'll tell you a deal that I'm currently working on now.
War stories.
And it's a property in Oak Park. Oak Park does not have a lot of inventory right now. This is a first-time home buyer. They are buying a single-family home. They're getting ready to start a family. They're very anxious to do that. And so I've had to sort of, keep them from chomping at the bit. This particular deal had a law firm that worked on mostly commercial transactions, so they really did not understand the process very well, and so they were constantly creating hurdles that didn't need to be there, and they were frustrating my client. At the same time, I was bringing the broker into it, and I was asking him some thoughtful questions about what is inventory in Oak Park like. If they were to walk away from this deal, what are the odds that they're going to find a similarly situated property? you know, and then we had a whole new wrinkle. The seller did not leave their heat up, and they burst all their pipes in February when we had that cold snap, and radiators exploded. I mean, it was a mess, and so they wouldn't let us in to look at the property. And I do first party property damage insurance, you know, claims as part of our practice, where we represent the insured. And so I'm like, all right, well, that's not an accurate statement that I can't go in to see the property. You know, there's no investigation that would prevent me from doing that. And we just want to get eyes on the damage. And they wouldn't tell us anything for weeks, and they expected us to stay in the deal. Now, in a situation like that, as the attorney, you need to be considering, are they not letting us in because they don't understand? Are they not letting us in because they know the market's hot, and if we quit the deal, they know they can put it back on the market and, you know, get a better price? And so we talked about that with our clients, and we talked about the fact that there was little inventory, and I had suggested that that we go in there and we get some contractors to take a look at the damage. Don't rely on their insured's estimate. Don't rely on their word. Just get our people in there and take a look, and see if there's any way that you can, you know, pivot from a radiator system to a forced air system, which might be cheaper. So you get air conditioning for cheaper, you know, because a lot of the houses in Oak Park are old. And they went ahead and they did that, and sure enough, it was considerably cheaper to get a forced air system in there. And, you know, so I just said to my clients, you know, what is your, you know, financial ability to finance something like this? Because, you know, here's what the credits are going to look like. Your lender's only going to allow so much. We could bury some of it in a tax proration. They could reduce the price, and I'll work with the lender to get the right formula there. But, you know, is this something where you could drop $20,000 of your own money into this as a long-term investment, or do you want something that's a little bit more turnkey? And both the broker and I were very comfortable with that approach, because it left the choice in the client's hands. You know, at no point can the client ever come back to us if the conversion is harder than we all think it's going to be, to look at us and say, you advised us to do this. We didn't. We gave them the facts, and we let them make the best decision.
Well, that's powerful right there, right? Which is putting, you know, asking questions and making sure that they're empowered to have a choice. So it sounds like you were doing much more above and beyond just law work on that transaction.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to have a mix in residential real estate stuff, to have a mix, whether it's me or my brokers or both, a mix of both, you know, legal and real estate acumen, but also some, you know, practical knowledge of this is what that repair normally costs. That you want to give on that. Like, that's not something you want to ask for. I mean, I've had clients that come back with 2-3 pages of inspection items, and I'll call them back and I'll be like, we can't do this.
Yeah.
And they say, well, you work for me. And I'm like, listen, I'm happy to do whatever you want. If we send them this in unedited form, the deal is done.
Yeah.
You know, and so knowing that, I think, is very helpful.
That's great, and especially we're in a time right now, it's spring of 2021, we're in a time where the market is hot, and you, working with buyers, Zach and Donna, when you have someone when you have an inspection, or when you have these things that there could be potential deal breakers, how are you coaching buyers through that to make sure that they understand that any kind of volley back to the seller is, you know, potential grenade on the table that could blow up the deal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we're in a huge seller's market right now, you know, and I think, excuse me, like, you know, sellers aren't given anything right now. They're not, and they don't have to.
Yeah.
Inventory is so nil, and
are you setting that expectation up front?
1,000%. And
Yeah.
Donna does a great job at doing that too.
Yeah.
And yeah, we set that expectation up front. I mean, if it's a safety or hazard item, of course, that's a different story.
Right.
But they're not getting anything caused
So
by
safety or hazard?
Correct.
Asbestos, water in a
Electrical,
basement.
something
yeah,
like,
big.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, and I mean, and we work with, we tend to work with the same home inspector who does a great job of being very, very deliberate with explaining, like, not just, you know, things to look out for, but just general home maintenance. But we also set that expectation of, he's gonna really educate you. And here's what you're gonna see on the report, and we're gonna discuss these things, but just as a rule of thumb, we're not gonna, I mean, the 70 pages on the report, we're not gonna go through it and nitpick things to, you know, put on a punch list. We're going to look at any of the big items that might be related to like bad plumbing or electric or something that, like, you know, the wood in the porch is rotting, where, you know, your foot might fall through. So things that are pretty significant, that's something that we can talk about.
Well, rule of thumb used to be, and it's a little different now due to the market, but rule of thumb was you don't ask for anything less than $500. You know, that was kind of the rule of thumb for my, you know.
Once the 7.1 came out, right, or the next contract where you
7.0, yeah.
7.0.
Yeah. So, you know, it was like, you know, 250, 500 or less. No, you're not asking for that.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, like, you know, like Donna was saying, you know, our inspector helps educate everybody, and he also helps helps set the expectation for the client too. It's like, listen, you can try asking for this, you know, but it's not going to happen, you know.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's our job and Sean's job too. But, you know, setting that expectation up front is huge, you know, especially at a market like this.
And let me take a step back for a minute to talk about our specific process.
Sure.
So one of the things that our law firm does that I think is very unique is we give our clients tons of materials up front. Checklists, insurance questionnaires, you know, when they're looking for homeowners insurance, a letter sort of describing the process and the steps and what their responsibilities are and why, and if they can't do them, when they should notify us, because we're happy to pick up the ball to help, but these are the things that need to get done. One of the things that I do with all of my deals is I don't just send it to a paralegal and have her start working on it. I pick up the phone and I call my client and I introduce myself. I also call the other broker and introduce myself. And I call the attorney on the other side and introduce myself as soon as we get their information. You know, so that they know that they can always call me if there's an issue, that I'm happy to talk about this stuff, that I really don't want to be a roadblock to the deal. But when we're talking to our clients, one of the things, and I think this is important to note, in a good attorney-broker relationship, you need to look like a well-oiled machine. You need to have consistent messaging. And so while they're giving that messaging that they just described, I'm also telling them, you know, I'm going through this, you know, some certain clauses in the contract with the client up front, and I'm saying, here's what that means. You can ask for, you know, safety items or things that are not operating as intended, and a 25-year-old refrigerator that is still operating is operating as intended, so you can't ask for that. You can ask for that, but it will kill a deal, more times than not. You know, so we're gonna get together, your broker, you are gonna talk, and then you're gonna come back to me and I'm gonna hop on the phone, and we're gonna have a brief conversation. You guys are gonna give me, you know, your ultimate list of asks. And, you know, if I think you're being unreasonable about an ask, you know, do I have your permission to speak up to tell you that? And I think it's important to ask the client that up front, because, you know, it's kind of like our Irish diplomacy, right? The art of letting them have my way.
Right. Well, yeah, and all while you're making your asks, right, there's new offers coming in over the email, so that's what you have to be thinking of.
Back up.
And they're looking at those going, whoa,
especially in this market.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to give on that.
Yeah,
You know, it's like,
exactly.
And
right.
yes, tightening a handrail is certainly a safety concern. It's also a 15-minute job for a handyman.
Yeah, and not only, just to be clear, not only do they not have to give, but they could just kill the deal by saying, I mean, that becomes a counteroffer, right?
Well, it depends on how you frame the letter.
Okay, how you frame the letter, but generally
Right.
speaking, it could be construed as a counteroffer where now all of a sudden it's like, no, thank you, but this one here is this.
Well, that's a good point too, and working with Sean,
Yeah.
he knows how to frame it up so that does not happen.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah,
Now-
that's a key.
Now, as a practical matter, they can still kill the deal for almost any reason in attorney
Yeah.
review. And would we have a right to sue or, you know, sue for specific performance or whatever? Yes, we would. Is anybody going to spend the money to do that? No.
Right.
So you have to manage the practical aspect of that as well, and not just stick on the law. Because just because you're right on the law doesn't get the deal done.
Okay, and so pausing on that, so you have the listing, and you see one of these letters from Sean coming over, right? Or a Sean on the other side, and you have the other offers that are coming in. Some better, some this, some that. What are you doing? What are you thinking?
We've gone through this a few times this year.
Yeah.
You know, Deerfield and, pardon me, we had a property, listing in Deerfield, a couple in the city. Yeah, they start rolling in, and I mean, you know, you just have to do your best to communicate to the client, say, okay, you know, we have this on the table, we're already under contract here. You know, let's take a look at this first, knowing that
You have backup.
you have backups.
Yeah.
And you do, you know,
Yeah.
on most properties that are in decent shape right now, that are priced
Yeah.
remotely right, you have that.
Yeah.
You have that.
And I
so-
think for the agent on the other side to be aware of that too. I've actually been on the flip
Great-
side of
great
that
point.
where, I mean, I am representing a buyer where, I mean, during the inspection, his agent like pulled me aside to let me know they have a backup offer. And just knowing that, I mean, it was a fairly new home. There
That's
were
pretty cool
really
the agent
weren't-
did that, right? I mean, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and I shared that with my buyer,
Uh-huh.
and there was some skepticism on his end. He's like, well, maybe he's just saying that. I'm like, but me, but like,
Maybe
do you
he's
want to?
not.
Yeah.
That's so
But,
funny.
like,
and-
is that a risk you want to take?
Yeah, no.
Especially since there's really not
It's-
there's really nothing to ask for except for maybe a couple of small.
And
steppings.
setting the market expectation has been such a big deal for us, like this year, is
Yeah.
like setting that expectation up front.
Yeah.
You know, saying, yeah, you know, you're gonna have to step up. If you wanna buy this year and get those low rent interest rates,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to step up, and, you know.
What does stepping up mean?
It'd be
Approval letter in place,
Good question.
you know, all these different
Yeah,
things.
well, that especially, well, yeah, I mean, those are the small
That's to
things.
get to the dance,
Let's
yeah.
just get to the
Yeah.
dance, but you're gonna have to pay more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay more, anywhere from, it just depends on where you're at, but anywhere from 3 to 5%, you know,
And-
so.
And not only that, but I mean, I think one way that you can communicate that to the clients, and you know, there are a couple points I want to make about these two,
Yeah.
is that you know they don't put me in an uncomfortable position of saying we got a better offer, let's find a way to kill this deal. All right, they, you know, if somebody does
It's
a deal,
happening all the time.
it does, and I think it's a
Right.
lack of integrity,
Yeah.
and they don't have a lack of integrity. They, you know, if they set a deal, that's their bond,
That's awesome.
and
You try to work in good faith to get
they
it,
do.
to get it done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I chatted, well, it's kind of what I mentioned before, is like,
Yeah.
listen, we have this here right now.
Yeah.
And I've had Donna and I just had clients, you know, literally wanting to, you know, saying, you know, to us, like, hey, how can we're not even on the market yet, and we've sold this off market, we're gonna get more money on the market. Let's figure out a way to kill this. I'm like, no, that's just a thought in your head. Let's not be greedy, let's work, we're actually already under contract, we already have a legal binding contract, so let's try to work through this the proper way, and like you said, the honest way.
Right, and you know, they'll rely on me to, you know, tell the client, could you get sued for this by killing it that way? Yeah, you could. Is it likely? I don't know that it's likely, but I can't tell you it won't happen. And do you want to spend $10,000 or $20,000, you know, and then end up having to sell this for $20,000 less? You know, and so, you know, I think that that's important. But the other thing is, you know, again, we go back to practical, right? You know, if they've got $500 of asks and they're all minor items, you can say, all right, we could go ask for that, and you know, by all means, I want to, you know, save my clients as much money when they're buying. But at the same time, you know, are they going to spend, if they walk away from this deal and they continue to look, are they going to lose potentially $500 in equity that they could have built up in their home by closing 2 months sooner? You know, and so there's a risk reward, and then what is the price of your sanity? What is the price of your time? What is the price of the broker's time? You know, I mean, you have to consider all of that, and if you found a property that feels good to you, then stick with it. And here's what we think the strategic ask ought to look like. We're never going through it and saying, this is a seller's market, don't ask for anything, we don't want to hear it. On every deal is different. You know, and so we're taking into consideration the other broker, we're taking into consideration the seller and the demeanor that we've been able to pick up there, we're taking into consideration the attorney, you know, and we're thinking about all of that in addition to the temperature of the market.
And to add to that, I mean, when I worked with Sean representing the buyer, I mean, he's been really good with really communicating those options and just being completely straightforward. Like, here are the things that we could ask for. You know, here are the different approaches we can take. However, there's more risk with this approach. And just putting the ball in mine and my client's court to ultimately decide on, how to proceed, but also giving us the ramifications of, realistically what's gonna serve our purpose and our client's purpose better.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a legal duty to my clients, but I'm also not, ignorant to the idea that, if this deal goes south, then they may have to put in 20, 40, 60 more hours showing more properties in a market that doesn't have a lot of inventory, and so I try to be respectful of that too.
Cognizant of just the realities of the transaction and everyone involved in it, I get that, and that's really a key for you guys.
It is, and vice versa,
yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, we're in a commissioned, only business, and same with Sean too.
Right.
And we wanna, it's so key to set expectations up front on especially on what Sean's responsibilities are and what we do as well too, and it's, and obviously there's always a little bit of overlap there, but
Totally.
again, if you set the expectations up front of how things are potentially going to go, then you're set up for success.
So, okay, things go bad. I don't know if they ever did between you in a transaction, but, emotions are high. People start.
I can't speak to
Right.
that.
Yeah, but ever, just as a salesperson, let's just say it.
Yeah.
Someone, whether it's right or not, that something goes wrong, where your phone is blowing up. Is there a certain thing or strategy or thought that you put into it to de-escalate? Or is there a certain process or habit that you have where you show up when it's not comfortable to show up?
Yeah.
I want to point you to a comment you made the other day when we were talking about the need to always be the calm voice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do is I usually meditate for 5 minutes. No, so I do some breathing
At the start of
exercises.
every hour.
I do some breathing
Yeah.
exercises
Yeah.
8 to 10 times a day. But there is some truth to that. But Sean and I were talking, and whether, like Sean said earlier, it's a big deal for these clients, buyers, sellers, combined, investors. It's a huge deal, no matter what price point it is. I mean, that's out the window.
Yeah.
So, and it's gonna be stressful. Whether we think it is or whether it's not, it probably is for them. So I do my best to put myself in their shoes always. Even if they're wearing it, even if they're walking down the street just smiling, it's still stressful.
Yeah.
So and things get a little hairy at times, like you said. So I always try to be the calm voice. I'll get a huge text message, and then you just pause a little bit, and then you say, okay, this is a big deal for them. Okay, let me maybe talk to Sean about it. Let me maybe talk to Donna about it, and then we respond.
Right.
But again, always be of service.
Yeah, just
You
be
know?
available
Be
and accessible.
available.
Right, you go dark for a long period of time and nothing goes away. Right,
There's-
that's for sure.
Great point.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with going dark for 15 minutes to an hour while you get a hold of the rest of your team
Yes,
to come back
absolutely.
with a holistic, cohesive response.
Yeah.
Great point.
The problem is when people go dark for a day or 2 days,
Yes.
and then the clients get freaked out.
Yeah.
We don't do it, but
Right.
I've seen it happen,
Yeah.
and you don't want that, because if you are selling yourself as a high touch, trusted advisor, you're shooting yourself in the foot by then not being that. And then as you lose credibility with the client, the relationship becomes more tenuous, not only for that transaction, but for referrals down the road, if they're going to use you again. So if you sell yourself as that trusted advisor, that's who you need to be. And trust is something that you earn.
I like what Sean said about the 15 minute to 1 hour pause, if you will, and that's so true, because and also you can still be a high touch trusted advisor and not answer phone calls at 10 o'clock at night.
Absolutely.
Right, and I think for somebody like me and I think for Donna too, we like being super over communicative with our clients, but also if I'm sending a text back right away from a response or maybe a stressful response or a stressful text, if I'm reacting to that right away, it's
Probably not
usually
your best foot
it's
forward.
usually
No.
it's usually
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
it's usually not aligning for a best response for them.
Mhm.
So like even pausing for 5 minutes
Yeah, take some
sometimes just to
time.
take a breath,
Yeah.
just read it and maybe think about it for a second.
I like
Because
that.
there was a time when I first started when I needed to respond
Oh,
to everybody.
no, I didn't. You
Right
know?
away. Okay, no,
I
I
called
gotta pull the
you.
car over. I gotta do this. Wait, you're saying that to me?
Right,
Yeah,
so
no,
true.
yeah.
I've got, like Donna and I have talked at 11 at night on deals before.
Yeah.
Because
Sure.
we need to.
Yeah.
All right, but she's respectful of boundaries, and she understands that when people, when you're outside of working hours, you're usually not working.
Yeah.
But I understand the business that we're in, and I understand that sometimes clients, ask frantic questions at late hours and stuff like that, and so I don't mind picking up. It's when the brokers, really have no respect for boundaries that I have an issue. And I remember one time I was in line with my stepdaughter when I was married at the Haunted Mansion at Walt Disney World, and I'm a big horror fan. She was a budding horror fan, and if you've ever been in line at the Haunted Mansion, the line itself is an attraction.
Yeah.
There's so much to pay attention
Yeah.
to there.
Yeah. You want to be in the moment.
You want to be in the moment, and I wanted to be in the moment with my kid.
Yeah.
And this broker was blowing up my phone, and I'm just like, hey, listen, with my kid right now, and he was blowing it up, and I finally called him back, and he just had like a random question that was a detail that frankly he should have been tracking on his own.
Yeah.
And that I don't know, I no longer work with that person, but for that reason and many others, but that person wouldn't get me to pick up at 11 o'clock. And so you have to have partners that are respectful.
Yeah, respectful, and just having this partnership of broker and attorney, when you let one of the key people in your transaction get away from you, and something goes wrong, even if you have nothing to do with it, it's hard not to walk away with some mud splattered on your suit as well, right? I mean, it's just what happens during that transaction. So controlling that piece of it with a good value partner for a reason, I think, is a professional duty. It's not just like option. It's almost a professional duty to make sure that you are delivering the experience that you want your client to have.
Well, the three of us are always considering the lifetime value of the client, right? So, as an attorney, if you're doing a buy, you're not retiring anytime soon on a $600 transaction. But it's a gateway drug into other work that you can do for them, whether it's estates and trusts or property tax appeals that repeat every single year. Where you're building an ever-growing revenue source with that practice, or they come to you with employment issues, or they have a personal injury case, or whatever. And so, I'm very thoughtful of how all of my actions are going to reflect on them, and so is my staff. And I'm so lucky, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention my staff, because they make me look so much better than I am. But we're all very thoughtful about the fact that we're privileged to have our referral sources, and we want to make them look good because they put their name out there for us, and so we want to live up to that, and they do the same for us.
So I've seen this traveling behind you there. We have things like, so we have certain mantras or statements Land Trust does, like we have your back, or it's an honor to serve you, or we're customer obsessed. So when we get someone that calls and complains, and that happens every now and then, right? You do thousands of transactions, and sometimes you let someone down. And but I think the first thing to go to is, okay, listen, that is not the standard. So I want to apologize for us not, so if we fell short of the standard, this is the standard. I acknowledge there's a gap, and then rebuild and say, listen, allow me to finish strong here. What can we do to get back to that? So it's not that to make it never happen, but it's to let them know that if I fell short, it wasn't intentional. It's not the way we operate, and give me a chance to make up for it. So hopefully you have reasonable clients that will allow you to win them back over.
Well, and I'll say for the purposes of the audience that what you just said about Land Trust is absolutely true, and that is your mantra, and you guys live it, and I appreciate that, and that's why you get so much of our business. But I think it was Muhammad Ali that said, it's not the best fighters aren't the ones that never get knocked down. It's about how fast you get up off the mat.
Yeah. That's great.
And
he said, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee as well.
He He said a lot of things, but
Yeah.
you know, and he's like the Yogi Berra of
Yeah.
boxing. But you know, I mean, I think that's important, right? And you know, one of the things that I think Land Trust particularly excels at, it's like one of my pet peeves when I'm dealing with people are people that won't take responsibility for their part in a miscommunication or their part in a problem or an argument. And you guys have always, you know, I mean, thankfully I don't have a lot of hiccups with you because your team is so good, but they happen, they have happened. And I think everybody, you know, what's important is there's a clear line of communication where I know, you know, when and how to escalate if I need to. And I know how to get a hold of pretty much everybody here, and I know what everybody's roles are, and it's an ever-growing company, so that's getting harder to figure out, but we have cheat sheets at our firm.
Good.
And you know, and it's great because, you know, I never have to worry about, you know, if there's something that's beyond my knowledge base, there's somebody here that knows something, and that's an incredibly important piece of advice for any attorney practicing in real estate is rely on your title company because they have people that have been doing this type of law only, you know, exclusively for 20, 30, 40 years. You know, Fran is a national treasure on your team.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, and so it's really helpful to be able to bounce that off of another attorney.
That's great.
You know, to say, you know, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to mitigate risk? Is this a risk I ought to care about? You know, I'm not really sure, and it's okay to admit you're not really sure.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day,
Use
the
the power
client
of the
just
team.
right. At the end of the day, the client just wants the right answer. They don't care whether you knew it at first or whether you had to go find it.
That's great. You know, you know, in you know, having the kids go through this e-learning, right? I love what you just said there. To know where to find it, because I think what we're learning through this e-learning is a lot of these kids are sitting down, taking these tests, and Googling every answer, and it makes me think: if you can Google the answer, why are we testing for it? You know, to begin with, right? I mean, you know, so you know, in some ways, it is the value of not of information, but I think the value of relationship that you guys are bringing to the table, and people experience you in a different way when they go, I was handed off from here to here, and it was a symbiotic, there was synergy, that we were aligned. That's just really powerful, and I think it distinguishes you in the marketplace. You know, so congratulations, guys, for pulling it together. Is there anything else we want to cover just on the broker-attorney relationship? Anything that we left unsaid?
I think it's important to talk about the hidden costs of using an attorney that doesn't do a lot of residential real estate.
I like that.
You know, I mentioned ad hoc processes. What I mean by ad hoc processes for people that don't know are you're just reinventing the wheel every single time. You don't have forms, you don't have workflows, your staff, you know, doesn't really remember how to do it. You know, and so it takes many hours longer, and you know that can irritate brokers because brokers will get back to you, they'll call you with questions, and like they feel like they're calling you every 2 seconds. You're saying, where is this? Where is this? Where is this? And it leaves a pit in their stomach. Am I accurate in saying that?
And right now in this market, if you miss a date, it could cost you the deal.
Right.
You know.
Expense free is not necessarily free.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is there is a cost of missed deadlines. You know, if you're a buyer and your lender misses a deadline, and we have multiple touch points built into our process, where we will check in with the lender, and if we're not getting answers from the lender, we will contact the buyer and we will get your lender in line. You know, we will also follow up and make sure that the buyer is getting everything they need into the lender, so that we're never in a position where we have to explain that, you know, we didn't get the financing because our client didn't get their tax returns in. You know, we never are in that position.
Can I say something real quick along the lines of what you're talking about? And you know, it's a little bit different type of fee, but it goes back to like you know clients using a friend or using somebody else, and you know it just made me think when you said the fees. I had a client that used a friend as an attorney, and he's an attorney. He was buying a multi-unit investment property, and she wasn't going to charge him. She's like, no, I'll do it pro bono.
Got what he paid for?
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Tenfold.
Wow.
Right, and it was. I mean, I ended up doing most of the work, but it just goes back to like it goes back to like work with the team.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, and when I say cost of missed deadlines, I mean, if you're a buyer and you don't have your financing contingency all set up, you know, a seller, especially in this market, can come back to you and say, you need to pick up my carrying cost, principal,
Yeah,
interest, taxes, insurance, and then if it's an HOA, the association fees. And so now, if you want to stay in that deal and not have the seller go back into a hot market, you're paying for all of that. You know, if you're the seller and you miss a deadline for whatever reason, and this happens too, especially if you're dealing with inexperienced lawyers on the other side, you know, the buyers have expenses. They probably gave up their lease, so they're gonna have to stay in a hotel.
Moving trucks, this,
Moving
that,
trucks,
blah, blah, blah,
storage.
family owned the town, work time off.
Right, like they might have scheduled somebody to help them with
Yeah,
the move,
yeah.
and now that person's not gonna be available, and so they do have to hire a professional, so they
Yeah.
may not have had moving costs before.
Yeah.
And then there's that added stress, you know, the stress on the client, the stress on the brokers, that you just want to avoid, because like Zach said, I think you always need to be the calming influence, the calming voice. You never want to be the source of stress.
It's already stressful. Why make it harder?
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, let's, you know, so kind of wrapping up, for salespeople, just salespeople in general, what, if there's one or two things that you would say were key disciplines for success?
Oh, I got this one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right, so this touches on, I forgot to mention this. This touches on something you said earlier when you say, what do you do when a client calls you and they're off the rails? Like, how do you calm them down? And one thing I learned a long time ago, again, in sales training, so, you know, the people on this podcast get the benefit of the tens of thousands of dollars that KPMG and FTI and other people paid to train me, is when a client calls you and they're yelling at you, if you visualize it as two hands together, they're pushing you like this. And so as the salesperson, you want to try and get back to center. And so, you know, they'll be like, blah, 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 and they push you, and so you're slowly trying to push them back to center and get them calm. But they might not be done yet. And so they'd be like, well, that's fine, but blah, 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 blah. And they'll push you. And as a salesperson, it is absolutely in your interest to let them tire themselves out. You know, let them get everything off of their chest so that they're calm. And then in a very non-condescending way, say, okay, I hear all of that. All right, here's my solution moving forward. You know, be solution oriented. Don't just say, okay, whatever, you know, out of the 5 things you said, 4 of them are whacked. Nobody wants to hear that. They're not going to respond well to it. So you keep pushing back to center until you no longer get resistance. And you don't try and push the other way. You don't try and, you know, get your way. You want to do what the client wants you to do, unless what they're trying to do is not in their best interest. And then you have to tell them that. And again, let them make a measured, thoughtful, informed decision.
I love it. Zach, how about you?
Repeat the question again.
Well, so the key question is, what,
Sorry.
you know, what were the couple of 2, 3 things that
Yeah.
you did to get things going? You don't have business.
Yeah.
What are you doing? How are you coaching a young salesperson or a new
Sure.
salesperson? What do you need to do?
Absolutely. So, you know, I mean, one thing is, and I think, you know, you've got to, I mean, people know a lot more people than they think they do, you know? Especially in the social media driven world that we live in. People have contacts, even warm contacts.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know this person across the social media realm, they see what you're doing, especially if you're posting, you know, different things, right? So like I think we have a lot more contacts than we think we do.
Okay.
You know, this lens becomes very narrow at times.
Yeah.
Contact everybody. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know who you are. Let them know you can help them. Every person out there can be a client. You know, every person you come across. I like Ryan Serhant's book. You know, Donna's read it too, but it's every person's your client. You got to think of every person as your client. That person working out on the treadmill next to you at the gym, that could be your client.
Yeah.
That person standing in front of you at Starbucks could be your client. You know, that person helping you out at the grocery store. But it's true though.
Yeah.
You know, and we
love
don't and we don't think that, but you know, use that as like a resource. So that's one thing, and organize that. you know, put it
You-
in the
use a
database.
Be
CRM
intentional, yeah.
Be intentional, exactly.
Yeah.
Use a CRM, even if it's 50, or even if it's 100 people,
Mhm.
organize it and follow it up. You know, I heard a stat the other day, from somewhere, and if you have, I was actually on a webinar with lab coat agents, and, if you have a 200 person sphere that you're working really hard,
Mhm.
you have more business than you know what to do with.
That's
And
awesome.
200, when you think of 200 people, you're like,
Yeah.
that's not really that many people.
Right.
But it is though,
Yeah.
if you're working it properly.
Yeah,
Well, there's a book called Guerrilla Marketing that I challenge everybody to go buy.
yeah, I love it.
I actually just bought it for a couple of my brokers in River Forest, and if you guys want it, I will send you.
I would love one.
All right, I will send out. Get on Amazon.
All right, here we go.
Now that I opened my
Yeah.
mouth, I owe you books.
Yeah.
But one of the precepts that they talk about in the book, and I'll butcher it a little bit, you know, just for the sake of brevity, but you know, when somebody sees a commercial the first time, they're like, oh, that's nice.
Mhm.
And then they see it the 5th time, and they're like, oh, that commercial again. And then they see it the 10th time, Jesus Christ, like this commercial all the time, I just want to watch my show. And the 12th time, they're like, well, maybe there's something to that. If they've got that kind of money in the marketplace, maybe it's a really good product. 15th time, they're like, you know, I could probably use something like that. And the 20th time, you're like, I gotta have it.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a balance, I think, you know, especially brokers on social media as an example, where I see brokers start to get into the business, and then their entire feed goes from pictures of their kids to all real estate all the time.
Yeah.
Use me, use me, use me.
Yeah.
And that can turn people off.
Totally.
There's a balance that you need to make, but at the same time, you know, you can't be driven by the people that don't want to see any ads, because that's your business.
Yeah.
You know, and so you need to take that feedback, I think.
And to Sean's point, you know, and I think we both have a very good social media following. I mean, you know, it's taken a while to build it up, but you know, you've got, people don't want to see real estate all the time.
Right.
They don't, and that's because that's not real.
Right.
You know, it's just not, because I mean,
Right.
we have other lives. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, we have, you know, we like to go to the gym, we like to go to dinner.
You do?
Not right now. I think August I get a day.
That's awesome.
Based on my phone calls with you, this is all you're doing all the time. But
Yeah.
Not right now.
Yeah.
But no, but it's but no, people want to see what you're doing.
And they want to be able to connect with you at that level.
And like I said before, they want to get to know you through
Yeah.
that, because
Yeah.
even if they don't know you,
Yeah.
you know, they want to kind of say, oh wow, look at, he just went to that really cool restaurant.
Yes.
You know, I've been thinking about going there.
Yeah.
well, and people buy.
So-
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
People buy for who they like.
Yeah.
And
There's
so,
no doubt.
you know,
and
like
trust.
my social media feed, you know, it has some legal stuff in it. I want to remind people what
Yeah.
I do, because I take it personally when somebody
Sure.
I know uses a different attorney.
Yeah.
I don't get mad at them, but I
Right.
ask myself, what could I have done differently to
You
let
put
them
it on
know
yourself,
that I do
not on
this?
them.
Right. Oh yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, and so I'm like, what could I have done differently to engender trust and let them know that I did this? But you know, I as an aside, like I want to give a plug here. I'm involved in a group called Real Estate to the Rescue, and Real Estate to the Rescue is an official 501c3 of the Association of Realtors in Chicago, and they're supported by them, and rescues and they're kind of my passion. Like I'm a big dog
That's
person.
cool. Yeah.
And there's a lot that you can build genuine affinity with clients by letting them know that, you know, I'm all about helping rescues, or I'm all about helping kids, or I'm all about cancer.
But it's a
research.
natural passion that you
It's a natural
translate
passion.
out to
Exactly.
a holistic business practice.
Right, and then people decide, you know, does this person align with me or not? You know,
Yeah.
do I have things in common with
Do I
them?
hate dogs or do I love dogs?
Right.
You know what? You know, I'm kidding.
No,
Yeah.
Do you hate dogs?
No, I don't. I love
Why do you
dogs.
hate
You are a
dogs?
cat person. You're a cat person.
No, I'm a dog person.
I'm outta here.
That's a great question, yeah. So, that's great, I love it, Sean. So, okay, closing questions here. So, Donna, Cubs, Sox.
Oh boy, Cubs.
Okay, Zach.
Brewers, actually.
Oh, Brewers.
She's a Milwaukee girl.
Yes.
I'm a
Okay.
I'm a Royals guy.
You're a Kansas City Royals, okay.
I like the Cubs and the Sox. Is that bad?
Okay, no, that isn't bad, that's okay.
That-
Follow the middle.
but
I
two of
already
my
know
best-
his answer, all right?
My best friend is a Sox fan.
Yeah,
One of my best friends is a Sox fan, but I go to more Cubs games. I mean, so,
okay. So Sean, I don't wanna tell you your answer, but I have a guess in my head already, but who is it?
What do you think?
I think it's Sox.
You are
I
correct.
I was gonna think it was
You are-
Sox.
Yeah, he
too,
just
actually.
seems like a Sox
What about
guy.
you?
I'm a Cubs guy, I was born on the north side.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to Bell School, I don't know if you know where Bell
Oh,
School
yeah.
is. Yeah, so
Yeah.
but I went there, I'm the one who made it
We
legendary.
love selling it, Val.
Right.
We love selling it,
Oh,
Val.
yeah, 3925 Claremont is my
Oh,
was my
yeah.
home, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, no, and I mean, just to clarify that, I was born and raised in Deerfield, so everybody always assumes I'm gonna be a Cubs fan.
Yes.
And I'm like Zach, like I like the Cubs.
Yeah,
as
you're
long
not
as
a
they're
Cubs
not-
hater, yeah.
Right, no, if they're
Yeah.
not playing the Sox, then I'm rooting for the Cubs, because
Yeah.
they're a Chicago team and Wrigley's fun.
Yeah.
And I mean that, 2016 was magical, I think, for everybody in Chicago, not just Cubs fans.
Well, so were the Ozzy Sox,
Right.
Magical. 05, was that
But,
05?
well, yeah, especially if
Yeah.
you're a big Journey fan.
Yeah, oh, there
You
you
know,
go, don't
but-
stop believing.
But my mom was raised on Taylor Street, and so she was the one that would bring me to baseball games all the time when I was a kid. And I went to some very impressionable games. I was at the Disco Demolition game,
Ooh.
as a
Steve
kid,
Dahl,
Yep.
Gary Meyer.
watching disco records burn.
No kidding, and they canceled the game that night, right?
They did.
Yeah.
And so, it was, my mom, our family had a restaurant on Taylor Street, and, that's the Italian side of my family.
That's great.
And it was just very much Sox fan. Now, when you say I'm like a Sox fan, I take a little bit of offense to that, because we're the guys that are known for, like, running on the field and beating outfielders, which I don't think I do, but we
Yeah.
do have better food and beer options.
No question about it. Sox Park is fantastic for food and beer. Zach, I noticed on your profile that you're part of a leadership organization.
Correct.
Yeah, why don't you just tell us about that before we wrap up?
Sure.
I wanted to hit that.
Sure. Chicago Leadership Alliance.
Okay.
And it's let's see. I became part of. I got the invite to become part of it about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And two good friends started it. Essentially, we're a young group of entrepreneurs, tech, philanthropists, community-driven type people that all come together, and we basically we collaborate and we give back in the community through different types of events and organizations. A lot of nonprofit involved too. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
for
you.
that. So in terms of the group, the Koran Group, are you looking for more agents?
Great question. I mean, luckily, we've had a very, very good year so far.
Okay.
I think at some point we will.
Okay.
I think at some point we're gonna definitely wanna, I think Donna has proven that she's just an awesome agent, and I think that's really, I think that role fits her well. So we will be looking for an operations person,
Okay.
probably sometime this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And Donna, you've been with the group for about a year, has it been? And that's pretty amazing, actually, to come in and really find your feet quickly
She's crushing
in
it.
real estate. That's awesome.
It's something, I mean, I think it's from my background, it was a natural transition. I think when the passion's there, and that's just, I know myself, I'm very intrinsically motivated. It's about loving what I do, and that's how you excel at it. And I think going back to the sales part of it, of what will make you successful, and I hope to get there at some point, the level of where Zach is. It's not really about the money, it's about the relationships and the people, and if you focus on those relationships, the money's gonna follow.
Absolutely.
But
Good for you.
it's
That's great.
it's people first.
Let me say one thing. And I've worked with people in the
Yes.
past, and other agents, and even very, very close.
Yeah.
And she has something that separates her from a lot of people too. She has that hustle factor.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
can't
Can't
teach it.
Yeah.
You can't teach it.
Yep.
Can't teach want.
Yeah, right.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there you
great. Congratulations. So let's talk about Byrne Law before we wrap up. Sean, so what about your law firm? Do you have capacity to work with some more agents right now?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We're constantly looking to add, more team members, and I look at them as partners.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we vet them as carefully as they vet us.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that attorneys are a little bit more fungible to brokers, so sometimes it's hard to communicate that value proposition. But I've got brokers in the marketplace like these two that are saying nice things to the brokers they're friends with, and we're constantly picking up new people. And the way we built our business, we scale according to how much work we have, and we have the ability to add part-time resources that are knowledgeable, so that if we need to burst up at any given time, we can. So that service levels never suffer. And I deliberately built that into the firm, in its DNA from the start, which is why we are so adherent on process, which is why we are so adherent on technology, and why we spend so much money on technology. I would venture to say we probably spend twice as much as your typical small firm.
Wow.
But it pays itself back in spades, and it allows us to grow and grow responsibly.
Yeah, so I just in closing, I want to say just congratulations on just a great year for all of you, and just thank you for being courageous during a time where people were wondering whether the economy is going to come to a full halt or whatever. There's a lot of first responders out there, but I really view the agents, attorneys, and people involved, our title closers, as somewhat first responders economically to keep the blood flowing in the real estate market. And there were decisions you had to make of safety and family and all these things, all of you. And am I still going to get out there and help people who want to sell their home for whatever reasons? They want to move closer to a loved one, or they want to get more space, or real COVID-related reasons even. You stayed in the game and helped people get through it. So I think it was a big key to giving people hope in the economy.
Well, you guys were a helpful partner in that regard as well.
Thank you.
Terms of, you were one of the first title companies to say only necessary parties. You'll put people in different rooms. If need be, if more people come than you're comfortable with. You were first on the scene, as far as I can tell, about like remote notaries and
we were.
remote closings, but remote closings that made sense. Like, you weren't telling us to like have our clients sit in a parking lot. That made some
That was a real silly thing,
Yeah,
someone tried to get smart, on that one.
No,
The
you
drive-by
didn't.
closings?
Yeah, the drive-by closings, Yeah.
You guys
It was like, here's your cheese fries, here's your Polish sausage.
Here's a tray.
Yeah.
There's a tray on the window.
I'd like
And for
fries
those-
with that, dude.
And for those of you wondering that are watching this, why none of us have masks on, we've either all been vaccinated or had COVID. So
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, well, hey, thank you guys.
Thank you.
I think this has been a treat. I think if someone sits and takes the time to listen and learn here, there's a treasure trove of information of how to be successful in real estate, how to build a great law practice, and then how to work together as a team to really satisfy customers. So,
well, thanks for your interest in wanting to talk to us. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so people not titles signing off. We'll see you next time. Thank you.